Dad shut himself inside his bunker at the start of the pandemic. 3 months ago, we lost contact with him. Dad shut himself inside his bunker at the beginning of 2020. He said the world was about to end, and when we didn't believe him, he told us to wake up. Dad wanted us to join him, and when we told him no, he called us brainwashed. He purchased the land before I was born. All I remember from him during childhood are the weekends at the bunker. Constantly renovating it and stockpiling it with everything he would need to survive down there. We couldn't stop him. He wasn't the best dad, not even a good one, but it was sad to see him go all the same. He was excited, even though he thought that civilization was about to collapse. We had to set up an old radio to keep in touch with him. He didn't trust mobile phones. We didn't hear from him often, just once a month, sometimes less. The last time he radioed in, he said he had found a hidden door. He was going to see where it went. That was 3 months ago. You think he's okay? My sister said. He wasn't in great health. I told him. We sat in the car, on our way to check up on him, driving through the heat wave. His radio might have broken down, I said. Let's not assume the worst, but I felt worried too. There was something strange about that hidden door, and his tone when he mentioned it. It didn't sit right with me. But maybe it was just the heat and the endless desert around us that played tricks on my mind. I couldn't really tell. It was dark when we arrived. Dad's truck stood where he had left it, beneath some tarp that blew in the chilly, sand-carrying wind. We turned on our flashlights and walked to the cliff above the bunker. The steel door was made to withstand a nuclear blast. Luckily, I owned the only spare key in existence. Before I used it, I banged on the door as hard as I could and yelled for Dad. I worried he would mistake us for intruders and shoot us. If he was confused, and if it was dark, it was a real possibility. I banged again and yelled at the top of my lungs, Dad, are you there? It's me, Josh. Evelyn is here as well. I don't think he can hear you, Evelyn said. I nodded. Dad. I'm going to open the door now. I was 17 the last time I was here. Back then it was the Muslims that were going to end civilization as we knew it. Before that, it was the Russians. Now it was China. There was always something threatening his beloved freedom, and yet he was never truly free. My sister put her hand on my wrist just as I was about to unlock the door. You know, she said. Maybe we should just call the authorities after all and. No, I said. He'll fight them. I unlocked the heavy door. A rancid smell escaped the darkness inside. It was the odor of death. I recognized it from when Dad tried and ultimately failed to learn how to hunt and let a reindeer carcass rot on the property for weeks. My sister had already stopped visiting him by then. I didn't tell her what the smell reminded me of. She covered her nose with her shirt. We descended the spiral stairs. It creaked for each step we took, almost as if it was about to fall apart. I tried the light switch at the bottom. The click echoed throughout the long corridor leading to the living area. Nothing happened. I realized that the batteries, which he charged by the use of an old exercise bike, were dead. That meant he was most likely dead as well. The generator could be broken, I said. But maybe you should wait back here, just in case. You know, I pointed my flashlight in front of me. The light was too weak to reach the end of the corridor. On the way here I had felt ready. I felt sad, the kind of empty sadness you feel after the death of a parent that was never any good, but I didn't feel worried. Now, on the other hand, while staring into the dark corridor that I used to run through as a kid, I was afraid. The fear reminded me of how my childhood night terrors used to start. They always crept up on me in the darkness, grew with the grotesque shadows on my bedroom ceiling. I'm not letting you go in there alone, Evelyn said. We stayed together. We walked into the darkness. The foul smell intensified for every step we took, and so did my heartbeat. I was glad my sister didn't stay behind. The bunker seemed so much smaller than I remembered it, much more cramped. The asymmetry between my memories and reality made everything feel off somehow, just as if the bunker was merely a model of the real thing. But it wasn't. I had just grown up. The Confederate flag greeted us at the end of the corridor. It hung on the concrete wall. It looked pale in the hot spot of the flashlight, almost like a phantom. And, of course, in many ways it was. A ghost from a time long ago. Or perhaps a corpse brought back to life. An abomination. It reminded me of Dad more than anything else. You have to be seriously confused to praise freedom as much as Dad and hang that symbol of lesser freedom in the world on your wall, Evelyn said. He wanted to protect his freedom so much that he built a prison for himself. I removed the light from the flag, leaving only darkness. You bet he was confused. We entered the main chamber. It was overfilled with litter and clutter. Empty cans both the food and beer kinds lay scattered across the sticky floor. We had to take large steps not to step on any of the trash. That's weird. Evelyn pointed her flashlight at the small dining table. Look, my hair stood up on my neck before I even realized what she meant. The table was set for 3 people. I didn't say anything for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing, and just when I was about to speak my sister interrupted me. Who the fuck was here with him? We don't know, I began. I mean, he might have left the old plates on the table and a sound of something falling to the ground came from one of the other rooms further into the bunker. I pointed my light in its direction but couldn't see what made it. Dad, I yelled. It's me, Josh. You there? No response. I'm afraid, Evelyn whispered. Something isn't right. I only vaguely heard what she said. My focus was on something else. Something on the wall on the other end of the room. That's not supposed to be there. I slowly walked toward it. That must have been what he talked about over the radio. Dad had hacked away a layer of concrete, for whatever reason, and uncovered a rusty, metal door behind it. It stood ajar. A lukewarm, musty breeze came out of it. My sister walked up to me as I carefully pried the door open with the back of my flashlight. I felt my heart in my throat. I could hear my sister begging for us to leave, almost in tears. But I needed to know what was behind that door. It was imperative to understand what had happened here. I needed to know. I needed closure. What in heaven's name? Evelyn looked over my shoulder. Why is this here? Behind the door was a room about the size of a broom cupboard. It was unremarkable except for a circular hole in the middle of the floor. I shone my light into it, but I couldn't see the bottom. Just as I thought it was big enough for a person, my sister said, "Do you think he fell?" Drops of sweat from my forehead fell down the pit. I felt dizzy and stepped back, afraid I would fall inside. My sister picked up a can filled with some rotten beans and threw it down the hole. It clattered against the walls as it bounced from one side to another. The sound faded away until we couldn't hear it anymore. There was no indication it touched down at the bottom. I stretched out my hand and held it above the opening. "It's warm," I said. Maybe he fell." Evelyn stepped back, almost as if she were convinced. "Can we please get out of here?" She reached for my arm. "We can return with the police. Please." "Josh, it wasn't dark when Dad found this," I said. "He would have seen the hole." "Josh? Please, just give me a moment to think." I walked toward the hallway that led to the other rooms, desperately hoping to find him. For some reason, it was important for me to see him. To be able to leave without wondering. I needed to know that he was truly dead. "I just want to." I stopped myself after I accidentally pointed the flashlight on the floor in the middle of the hallway, revealing a pair of feet. "I think I found him." I ran up to the body. "Wait," Evelyn yelled and reluctantly followed me to avoid being left alone. It wasn't Dad. I screamed upon the realization. My mind couldn't comprehend what I had just seen. I spun around and tried to run away, completely acting on instinct, and crashed into my sister. She grabbed me, kept me still, and as she looked behind me, down at the dead body on the floor, she began to cry while her hands trembled uncontrollably against my shoulders. "Oh my God," she said. How? How is it possible?" "It's you. Let's get a fuck out of here," I said. "Move." There was nothing that could explain this, and the more my mind tried to semicolon moving in an endless loop doing so semicolon the dread grew inside me. I only got a glimpse of the body before I panicked, but my sister was right. The half-rotten face was the same as mine, with a bullet hole in the middle of the forehead. We stumbled our way through the living area, tipping over chairs and kicking cans all over the place, and just as we were about to get out of the mess a familiar voice echoed through the hallway we had just escaped. "Josh." It was Dad. We both stopped in our tracks. "Is that you?" "Josh, Dad?" I yelled back. "What the fuck is going on here?" "Don't worry." It sounded like he was at the other end of the bunker, possibly inside the storeroom. "I killed the son of a bitch," put a bullet right between his eyes. "Come out from there," I yelled. "We have to leave, it's not safe here." Silence. "Something is wrong," Evelyn said. "I don't think." "Dad," I yelled. "Come out." "I can't move," Dad said. "I'm stuck under a shelf." "I'll need your help, son." I turned to my sister. "Go back up. I'll get that old bastard out of there. We'll be right behind you, okay?" "Think, Josh." Evelyn begged. "You think he's been stuck under a shelf for?" I should have listened, but even after what we had just seen I just couldn't bring myself to even consider something as outlandish as what my sister was suggesting. It was simply too far-fetched, too unbelievable to penetrate all my layers of presumptions about reality. It couldn't be, it just couldn't. Hence, I ran back to the hallway, yelling for my sister to get back up to the surface and wait for us there. "I'm coming, Dad." I only slowed down to carefully step over the corpse that bore my face. Perhaps, I thought, it was just a coincidence. A burglar that just happened to look like me. After all, the face had begun to rot. It wasn't obviously me. I felt stupid and I almost convinced myself that it was just my childhood fear of the dark coming back to life down here. And then, just as I was about to walk past the small composting toilet that stood inside a small room at the end of the hallway, I stopped. Shivers spread across my entire body, paralyzing me. Dad sat on the toilet. His gun still hung from his trigger finger and his brain was splattered across the wall behind him. He had his journal in his lap, covered in blood. "Josh," Dad yelled from the darkness. "Help me." I was frozen in place, both by fear and confusion, unable to make any decisions. "Come on, Josh." Dad kept yelling. "I need your help, son." My mind was racing. There was no way of knowing who was who. When I heard Dad's voice yelling for help while watching his dead body, nothing but absolute terror reverberated inside me. I slowly reached for the journal in Dad's lap and grabbed it, hoping it would shed some light on the situation. I was just about to open it when my sister screamed. I ran back, this time jumping over my doppelganger's body, and found her looking at something at the corner of the main chamber. "I told you to," I said, but changed my mind. "Are you okay? What happened?" She cried. "It's me." Crawled up in the corner was her naked, dead body. Her head had been twisted in such a way that the neck had been broken. "There's something seriously wicked going on here," I said. "Dad shot himself in the head, a long time ago by the looks of it, and yet he keeps yelling for help. Let's get back to the car, now." We drove away from the bunker as fast as we could, leaving whatever was still alive down there yelling for help. My sister insisted on staying at my place for a few days. I didn't mind having her around. We shared an experience no one else could relate to, and we needed each other to overcome the trauma. It took a day for me to build up the courage to open Dad's journal. It began with his usual deranged conspiracy theories.
What's something a sibling did for you that you'll never forget? My parents made me a parent at age 6. 30 years later, my brothers restored my faith in humanity. At a very young age, I was forced into learning all of the fundamentals of being a mother. I was taught how to change diapers, how to prepare milk, how to carry my brothers, and had to do all of the chores around the house. I was 6, and even then I knew I had a very abnormal childhood. My parents didn't seem to care for me at all, and instead just saw me as a worker that would take care of their kids so they didn't have to do anything. By the age of 9, I had practically raised my two twin brothers Hayden and Theo. Growing up, my parents would constantly tell me that since I was the oldest, I had the responsibilities of taking care of my brothers. When I turned 12, my parents essentially abandoned me to focus on their business. I started skipping school in the 5th grade, since my parents would randomly just leave the house with my younger brothers there. It was a nightmare. And it only got worse. When I turned 16, my parents pressured me into taking my driver's exam. Once I had my license, they threw everything at me and started living away from home. They bought me a car, but I was now responsible for driving my brothers to school, their appointments, their events, wherever, whenever. I wasn't their older sister, I was their caretaker. I had to ensure their homework was finished every night, cooking and cleaning were all my jobs, and so on. It had gotten so bad that my brothers had started referring to me as Mom. This made me happy to a degree, but part of me also wished their actual mom was there instead of me. I'd never had a birthday party thrown for me, my parents weren't there for my graduation, and even our grandmother's funeral wasn't important to them. Anything that involved myself or my brothers was just a nuisance. It was all on me to step up to the plate. My parents would prioritize friendships over their children every time. There was no such thing as a family vacation. My parents would rather go with their friends. The only thing my parents ever provided was a roof over our heads. After I got a job, my parents stopped buying me clothes, paying for food, gas and so on. They even started taking a percentage of each of my paychecks to put towards our monthly bills. As long as they didn't have to deal with us or talk to us, they were more than happy to provide a roof over our heads. When I graduated from high school, I had the opportunity to leave for college, but I chose to stay behind and attend the local college. My brothers were still young at this point, and I didn't want to abandon them like our parents did. A couple years later, when my brothers graduated, the three of us decided to move out together. Surprisingly, my parents offered to pay for the apartment, and being a broke college student, I reluctantly accepted. It was around this time that I met my current boyfriend, Marcus. I started dating him in my early 20s. I had met countless people before him, but none of them were accepting of my brothers and I's living conditions. Marcus was the first. Marcus and I have been together for almost 6 years now, and he's wonderful. He understands my position in my life, and constantly makes the effort to hang out with my brothers, which led to their monthly boys-only night. His family is just as amazing. They accepted all three of us with open hearts and arms. Marcus's family has 3 sons, with Marcus being the oldest. Their dad loves young boys, and would always be sure to invite my brothers out for their boys-only camping trip, while I was getting spoiled by his mom on our girls' nights out. It was amazing experiencing such warmth and love for the first time. Fast forward to May 2020. Both of my brothers called me over to their newly built home, and said they had a surprise for me. When I arrived, they sat me down in the living room. They explained that they were in a very financially stable position right now, and wanted to give me a percentage of their salary so that I could quit my job and do whatever I wanted to. "We want you to experience the things you missed out on while having to take care of us," said Theo. "I know it's not much, but it's the best we can do right now. I know we can't give you your youth back, but I hope you can still fulfill your dreams with this money." I broke down into tears. I felt like I was dreaming. While I would have done it in a heartbeat again, taking care of my brothers for so long had really put a toll on my mental health. Every day I had to remind myself that it didn't matter how I felt, as long as they were happy. For the past 3 years, every Mother's Day, they always make sure to buy me a card and a gift. It's usually a sentimental note with a personal gift. I keep them all on my dresser, and I'm always sure to let them know how much they mean to me.
My son joined the KKK by accident and he won't leave. I cannot believe I'm in this situation. Basically, I am the single adoptive father of this 13-year-old boy, Paul. Paul's actual parents are my sister and brother-in-law, and they were both killed in a drunk driving accident. The person who killed them was a black woman, and my son has always had a special resentment for her in particular, but never did I think he would let his prejudice seep into hating all black people to ever exist. Basically, I was doing work on my computer when I got a weird-looking email. Instinct told me to put it straight in spam, but curiosity got the best of me, so I opened it. The message itself is super cryptic. The text just said, "Hey man, I thought you would want to know what Paul is up to," but the pictures were nowhere near as nonchalant as that message. It basically showed Paul at a KKK meeting, entering what seemed to be a pretty inconspicuous building, but then a bunch of people in white, pointy hats coming out. There's no way to misread this, it was super obvious. And since I knew what I did about the person who killed Paul's biological parents, I immediately dragged him downstairs for a talk. First, I told him that one person does not reflect on their entire race and that one drunk woman can't possibly shape his opinions on an entire race, and my plan was to then move into a pretty elaborate anti-racism educatory lesson, but Paul interrupted me and just said, "Oh, so you found out that I joined that organization, huh?" And I was just sitting there, speechless that he could refer to the KKK so nonchalantly, when he shrugged his shoulders and just said, "I know what people think of them, and I don't care. I'm not leaving." Apparently, he's been talking to them for a few months or so about his parents' deaths, and they somehow brainwashed him during these hate crime therapy sessions into joining, and now I have no clue what to do. I can't call the cops, I can't ask other family members for help, And I can feel Paul's parents shooting arrows at me for letting this happen to their precious son. What on earth do I do in this situation? Please help. Parents, how did you watch your kid's life go down the drain? My youngest daughter Lynn was always a beaming beam of light. She was always the happiest girl. She never complained about anything. Unlike her older brother Joshua, it was around her freshman year of high school when I started to notice a slight change in her behavior. She started to wear more makeup and less clothes. When confronted about it, she would always get very angry with me, shouting about how it's her body and she can do what she wants. Another grand excuse was the "but everyone else is doing it, mom." This was really hard for me to watch, because I was seeing my precious sweet little daughter trying to turn into what she thought was a real woman. I always tried to explain to her that makeup and wearing less clothes doesn't have to mean what everyone else is doing, and that she should take pride in what she wants to be. Regardless, she wouldn't budge, and I'm a big believer in more lax parenting, so at the time, I just let her be. I thought maybe it would just be a phase, but our relationship slowly got worse and worse. Debates became arguments, and arguments became fights. She would start to bring guys over, and while I didn't get a look at all of them, I saw some that looked twice her age. Then, one day, I snapped. I was going through her room when she was gone for school one day to try and find something I knew she had taken. While searching the nightstand, I realized there was a tiny white baggie that was tucked in behind the lamp. I had my fair share of college days, so I knew exactly what that little baggie entailed. I had a huge confrontation with her when we got home from school. She eventually started to yell at me, and I returned the favor. It got so bad that the next morning when I checked on her to see if she left for school, she had vanished. 2 suitcases in my closet had gone missing, and I called the police immediately. How could my sweet Lynn do this? Run away from me, the person who loves her most in the whole world. Brad and I searched the whole neighborhood, drove for hours around our smaller town. We would find nothing, and so would the police. After around 4 years of no contact, one of my daughter's friend's mom shared a concerning post with me on Instagram. It looked like a video of my daughter in a news report. At first I didn't understand why she would be on the news, but then I looked at the headline. Intimacy workers uproar in south side of town. I couldn't believe it. There was no way my daughter had really gone down that rough. The more I examined her in the clip, the more she looked drugged out of her mind. Tears started instantly floating from my eyes. Here I was sitting in my bedroom watching my daughter's life spiral out of control, and there was remotely nothing I could do about it. The video was from Los Angeles, California, and I lived in a small town in Texas. After a few days of living with this news, I decided that it was only right that I go and look for my daughter. In moments like this, I knew my child needed me. I booked the next available flight to Los Angeles and made my way there in less than a couple of days. The next few weeks consisted of me getting in my rental car and searching all over the south side of town just like the news report had said. I would pick a street, drive all the way down until it seemed to end, go over a block, and repeat. I knew the chances of me seeing her were slim, but I had no other choice. At that point, I knew the police were really no help, and so I didn't bother contacting them. One day, the miracle happened. I was driving down a desolate run-down neighborhood when I saw what looked like my daughter's distinct features. I got closer, rolled down my window, and shouted her name. Lynn. She turned around instantly, and there she was, my beautiful baby girl. I got out of my car and ran to her. To my surprise, she started running to me. Mom? Mom. We hugged each other like we never had before. Tears were rolling down each of our faces, and it was truly a moment I'll never forget. She got in my car after about 10 minutes of hugging and crying, and I took her to get food and sit down and talk. She still looked drugged out, and I could tell she was hurting. When we were eating, I thought we would have a good conversation, catching up about things and how everything was. Instead, she sat there with a dull look on her face the whole time, not really showing any emotion. I didn't know if this was the drugs talking, but it really spooked me out. I got her to conversate a little near the end of dinner, but after we finished, I got in my car expecting her to follow. She didn't. She just stood there staring at me. I asked her what she was doing. Didn't she want to come back with me and have a new start? She came closer to me and told me something that will haunt me for ages to come. I can't come where they will find me and hurt me. That is where I drew the line. At this point, I knew I had to get the police involved. I insisted on her coming with me, but she said that they were watching now and that they had already warned her without me noticing while we were eating. I told her to stay where she was and don't move as I called the police. As the phone was ringing, I noticed that she seemed to look off in the distance, looked at something, and then moved right back to me. She hugged me one last time, said, "I'm sorry, but I love you, Mom." Then she ran. She ran faster than I ever could. I tried to catch up, but she just outpaced me. Eventually, I tried to get in the car to find her, but to no avail. It seemed that someone had picked her up just like that, and I had lost my baby in a matter of seconds. The police said they would look into it as I was desperately explaining to them what had happened. It's been a couple of months since, and I'm more depressed than I have ever felt in my life. I drink my despair away, waking up with the most vile hangovers. I've had multiple unaliving attempts, and my son has raised the idea of going to a psychiatrist or even a mental hospital. Him saying that has only made my depression worse, and I am drowning in my own sorrow. I now know my daughter is in trouble and I couldn't even protect her when she was right there in my possession. I feel like a failure of a mother, a failure of a protector, and failure of a human. Seeing my own daughter's life spiral out of control made me fall into my own pit of despair. I strive for the day I see her again, but I felt like that was my last chance, and it makes me extremely sad that I might never see that beautiful face again. What did your psycho ex do? I caught my girlfriend of 6 years cheating on me in the basement with a guy who looked no older than 16. When I caught them, I told them to make themselves home, have fun, and went upstairs to do my daily things. Few minutes later, I heard them mumbling things to each other in the hallway and the guy left the house. Girlfriend hesitantly checked on me. I was cooking my meal, and after some minutes of silence she started screaming, shouting and accusing me of not loving her, pleading with me to show some reaction. She threw things at me, shouted and cursed. I didn't budge a bit and completely ignored her. After she consumed all of her rage, she simply left the house. Now the thing is, it's not like I didn't love her. I firmly believe cheaters are losers. The only reason they do things behind their partner's back is they are dependent on their partner in one way or another. That is why I believe it's best to ignore them. She became just another person for me when I caught her cheating. It was her choice, not mine, so no need to get sad even though it may sound cruel. I packed my important things and left the house the same night. In the following year, I made sure to live my best life. Got my so-deserved promotion, a fat raise, and hit it off with a girl I met a few weeks after the incident. All that time, I did not block her from any of my social media, so she knew everything in my life. She messaged me every day, tried to convey messages through our friends, but I just laughed it off and ignored everything. Last week, her calls got even more aggressive. Had thousands of unread messages from her and I simply ignored them again. Days after, I had police officers at my door and I was taken to the police station to be investigated. They told me she ended her own life and blamed me in her note. After explaining everything to them, I went back home. Old mutual friends, her relatives, and even some of my relatives have been blaming me for everything. Some call me a monster, some call me an emotional abuser. I read all her messages last night. Felt like she was having a different emotion each time she wrote to me. She started by begging me to take her back, then blaming me for everything, then sending random explicit photos of her. Each time she was ignored, she looked more desperate to get an answer from me. In last week's messages she was threatening to end herself, and after being ignored again she sent one last voice message crying and begging. After going through the messages, all I felt was pity. I still do not know why her parents and friends did not notice she was going into a downward spiral. They are hypocrites for blaming me. Again, it was not my choice, it was her choice to do such a thing.
My transphobic boyfriend just proposed to me. I'm about to tell him a secret that will destroy us. My fiancé Mark and I met during grad school orientation 4 years ago. We were in the same program and ended up in all the same classes. We became fast friends, bonding over late night, studying and talking about life. After a few months, friendship turned to romance. We just clicked on every level. By then, I had already transitioned. I started hormone therapy at 20 and had gender confirmation a year later. I've known I was a girl trapped in a boy's body since I was a little kid. Transitioning saved my life, but it cost me my family. My parents and siblings are devout Catholics. We were always forced to go to church since a young age. During confessions, I ended up telling my priest that I think I am a woman. He immediately told my parents. They said I was possessed by demons and would be condemned by God. I backtracked and took back what I said, fearing that they would cut me off. By 18, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I couldn't lie to myself. I came out to my family, and my worst nightmare happened. They cut me off completely. I was devastated. For years, I agonized over what I did to deserve their abandonment. I sank into a deep depression, feeling unlovable as my true self. After a long recovery, I found solace in being free. I was excited for what this new chapter of my life would bring. However, the scars from my family's rejection still remained. When we got married, his entire family was there, but mine was nowhere to be found. Before the ceremony, I got asked lots of questions about where they were. I knew this was going to happen, so I came up with an excuse. They don't agree with my religious beliefs, so my family cut me off. I had received lots of apologies and condolences from his family, but I had already gotten over it. Besides, if they knew the truth, they would have sided and agreed with my family, as they are also quite conservative. The ceremony was great. I looked beautiful, and he looked amazing. I couldn't have asked for a better wedding. But still, I had a lump in my throat knowing that I would have to eventually break the news to him. The night came, and it was like just any other wedding. Dancing, music, and lots of drinks. But Mark was getting tired of all of it. He whispered in my ear. "What do you say we get out of here? Go back to the hotel?" Here it is, I thought. This is the part where he finds out. "Honey, I don't know. Look at all the more we have to do. Music is playing, people are dancing." He put his finger on my lips. "We've seen enough." He looked visibly nervous. I was growing worried. "Honey, are you okay?" "I'm fine, yes." "Now, what do you say?" I gave in. We went back to the hotel. I already knew what he wanted to do when we get back. He was kissing me on my neck on the elevator. When we got in the room, I began to get nervous, but so was he. Instead of doing anything, we simply sat down at the foot of the bed. He took a deep breath. "Honey, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done this to you." I froze. Was he about to admit to something? Lying? Cheating? What are you talking about? I should have told you sooner. I'm so sorry. A few months ago, I got in touch with your sister. I found her on Facebook. We spoke a bit, and I got to know her. And we met up. And I couldn't bear to hear anymore. Tears were streaming down my face. I had nowhere else to go, so I ran into the bathroom and locked it shut. Honey, please. I'm sorry. Let me finish. I don't need to hear anymore, I said. Honey. I know that you're transgender. I froze. My sister must have told him. Not only did you sleep with my sister, but she told you? What? No. I didn't sleep with your sister. That's not why I met up with her. I wanted to ask her about your relationship with your family. I felt like you weren't telling the truth. I slowly unlocked and opened the door. So, you're not mad? I asked. Of course not. I reached out and hugged him tight. I was so relieved. All my worries, all my struggles suddenly faded away. But honey, there's something else I need to tell you. I slowly let go of him. I backed away from him, fearing what he might say. I'm also transgender. I froze. That was not what I was expecting. His family isn't hardcore conservative. He told them to say that so that they would get along with me and my fake Catholic beliefs. They knew the whole time, and they never bothered to tell me because they assumed that I already knew. We've been married for 3 years. We were able to have our own kids, and we have a beautiful daughter who is turning 1 next month. I've been able to get back in touch with my sister with the help of my husband, and she has also realized that our family's beliefs and decision to cut me off were absurd. I'm grateful that I can live a life like this with my husband. I'm excited about what the future brings for our new and growing family. But every now and then, I think about this entire situation. I just can't help but wonder. What are the odds?
Today I effed up by texting my pregnant wife that this isn't working. I went to work today and turned my phone off as usual. I had almost 30 missed texts and calls from my pregnant wife when I turned it on. Most of them were asking how I could do this. I had no clue what she was talking about. She didn't answer any of my calls back. I got home and she was packing up to leave. I'll admit it, I cried. A lot. Had no clue what was happening or what I did. Finally, it comes out that I texted her that I wanted a divorce. She showed me the text and I immediately realized what happened. This morning, a freestanding mirror for our bedroom was delivered. I texted her the new mirror came in. I'm going to try to put it together, but I may need your help later. I had trouble putting it together and eventually gave up. I texted her, this isn't working, and at this point, I think I need to just give up. Apparently, the first text didn't go through, just the second one. So my pregnant wife panicked for a few hours while I was off thinking everything was great. She even called a divorce lawyer. Things are fine now, but she's still crying off and on. She told me we can laugh about it tomorrow. I usually work from home unless I need to meet with clients. I don't always tell my wife when my client meetings are, because she's usually at work anyway. That's why she didn't know I was at work yesterday. I'm not allowed to have my phone on at work until my wife is 30 weeks. If my phone goes off, I could lose my job, and our health insurance. My wife has an anxiety disorder and had to stop taking her meds because of the pregnancy. That's why she had the reaction she did. My comment about my wife being forgiving was a joke. Neither of us is mad at the other. This was just a series of misunderstandings that snowballed. We're fine. I posted this so people could laugh at our misfortune. No need to psychoanalyze my wife or PM me about divorce. We are fine. And no, we haven't put the mirror together yet. We weren't really in a home improvement mood last night. When did you realize there was something insanely wrong with your family? I think I was probably 14 when it finally clicked that something was really off about my family. My earliest memory is the police being called to our trailer because my parents only had one vehicle and my dad was kicking my mom out, but wouldn't let her take the car. This was a recurrent situation where my mom would be kicked out, take me with her, and then have me call my dad and beg to come home. This started when I was 4 and went on for years. I have spotty memories of being shacked up with random strangers that my mom knew for who knows how many nights. It would always end with my mom putting me on the phone to make daddy let us come home. Mind you, at this time, I had 2 brothers. I had a younger and an older, but I was the only one who had to leave. I found out when I was 10 that my dad is not actually my biological father, so that explained a lot. It only progressed as we got older. My parents are not alcoholics or substance abusers, they were both middle-class working adults during my childhood. We lived in a normal house, normal neighborhood, with no genuine excuse for their behavior as far as we knew. My parents would argue for weeks at a time. The same argument, from the time they woke up at 4 a.m. until the time they went to sleep at 12 a.m. Then repeat the next day. Arguing was the easy part. They would throw things, break phones, remotes, TVs, and computers. They would even throw chairs through walls. They would break whatever was around. That was the beginning. They never argued in private, hell no. They made sure it was out in the open. Even to this day, at 22 years old, loud noises put me on edge. Screaming immediately causes me to freak out and flinch. Straight PTSD stuff, I guess. Eventually it progressed into more violence. Hitting each other, breaking bones, throwing each other on the floor. Sometimes we would listen to our mom scream bloody murder while my dad choked her and slammed her against the bedroom door. Sometimes we would listen to my dad scream when my mom would throw stuff at him. Most of the time it was my mom screaming because she couldn't get up or couldn't breathe. But for us, this was normal. I didn't have many friends, if at all. I talked to some people in school, but the rule my parents told us was that we never talk about our house. If we say bad things, DCF will take us away and put us in foster care. They would always tell us that you don't even know what abuse is. So, for us, this was normal. All kids' parents fight like this. Everyone watches their mom get choked. Everyone hides in the closet when they're afraid their parents are going to kill each other. It's normal. My parents are especially weird about control. We were not allowed to have vegetables. We absolutely could not have vegetables unless we went to my grandmother's. Why? Because my dad hated them. We were only allowed to eat what he liked to eat. He is a picky eater, so the menu consisted of pizza, French fries, soda, chicken, or burgers. Nothing else. Everything we ate, we had to ask permission for, and even as an adult I'm really not sure if this is something people do or not. We couldn't drink milk in the house, because it was Dad's. We couldn't eat cereal because it's Dad's. We couldn't drink soda, or water bottles, or juice because it belonged to Dad. When we were told to eat, we had to eat. We didn't have a dinner table once I was like 11 years old. Our eating arrangement was to eat a huge plate of way too much junk food in front of the TV. It eventually got to the point that I stopped eating at home. I started eating only at school, because I promise you eating pizza and French fries 7 days a week is repulsive. If friends came over to our house, my brothers and I would freak out if they grabbed a soda without asking. We would have to call my mother and ask if we were allowed to have a drink or eat something. Friends would look at us like we were crazy, but that's just our normal. None of us were ever allowed to cook either. Even now, every time I cook, my mother criticizes it. She makes fun of how I stir things, or that I'm always doing it wrong. I had to learn how to cook on my own, and she hates it. My parents are also very against academic success. I was a 4.0 student, graduated with a 4.77 GPA after giving up on school, with over 86 awards accumulated over my schooling. I was not allowed to join extracurricular activities, I could not participate in school programs, and I absolutely could not attend any event I was invited to. I was invited to international exchange programs, Microsoft events, presidential student events, but could not attend any of them. My parents were also very sure to rub in the fact that they could afford these endeavors, but instead spent the money on their own luxuries like my dad's old '87 Mustang. Or buying new cars every 2 years. Or buying a camper. Or four-wheelers. Or guns. My parents never showed any sort of emotional affection towards one another either. In the 22 years I've been alive, I can count how many times I've seen my parents kiss on the mouth. Twice. They do not have any physical contact and spend 99% of their time cussing or calling each other sarcastic names. They absolutely never express any affection towards one another. My entire childhood I was repeatedly told I cannot touch other people. Even now as an adult, my parents are weird if I am sitting beside my fiancée. Sitting beside, keyword here. They used to break our stuff. Pin us against the wall and punch us. Throw us on the floor. Drag us by our hair. Punch, kick, bite, and slap us. The usual stuff you expect from parents who hit each other then move on to their kids. When I broke my ankle, I was never taken to get it checked. I jumped off the ramp that led into our shed and my foot landed in a hole. The bottom of my foot bent and touched my calf, and it was dangling. I physically couldn't walk back to the house, so I crawled on all fours screaming in pain. I crawled into the house crying and my mom looked at me and said, "Why the hell are you crying?" I told her my foot touched my calf and I can't walk, and she looked at me and said, "It's probably broke, go to your room." So for the next 3 months, I went to school with some gauze half-ass wrapped around my ankle and had to limp everywhere. My teachers let me go to lunch 20 minutes early, because by the time I made it to the cafeteria, the class was already there. Then my parents also decided it was a great idea to put a poisonous thorny tree in our front yard. I ended up running into it by accident and had to get a 3-inch thorn surgically removed from inside my hand. But, back to the point. Well, when I was in middle school I met a girl named Nicole. Her family is exactly what you see in sitcoms. The bubbly stay-at-home mom who bakes cookies for her children's school. The father who makes $200,000 a year, and makes sure to invest every bit back into his family. They had actual fruit and vegetables in their house. I stayed the night one time and her mom made crepes. I was so surprised because I had never seen anyone cook a breakfast like that and sit at a dining table together. For me, it was so weird to watch. They had 3 children also, but each had a savings fund for college as well as spending money for doing chores. That really confused me because I thought that was only in movies. Their entire family made me so confused. I legitimately didn't think parents acted that way. Her mom and dad hugged and said they loved each other. I seriously had to sit down and talk with her and ask if they always acted this way. As time went on and I started to meet other people's parents, I realized, yeah, what the hell happened with mine? Allow my autistic daughter to get attacked at recess? Fine, allow my husband to absolutely violate you. A couple days ago, my daughter Olivia was assaulted during recess at her middle school. She was punched in the face by a boy who's known to be the class bully. I received a call from the school principal that started out with him saying that the school nurse felt my daughter needed to be seen in the emergency room. When I asked what happened, he sort of blew me off and urged me to pick her up immediately. My heart sank to my stomach. I sped over to the school as fast as I could. On the way there, I called my husband and he was already aware of the situation. He also just left work to go to school, so that made me feel a bit better. When I got there, I went to the front office and saw my daughter sitting by herself with an ice pack over her right eye. For context, my daughter is nonverbal and has autism. So when I saw her sitting by herself unsupervised, I was furious. She stood up and hugged me with her free arm while the other one held the ice pack over her eye. I almost cried, but I held it together for her. I put my arm around her and we walked to the back of the office in search of the principal. We get to the back and the principal is sitting at his desk, eating chips and typing on his laptop. I asked him what happened to my daughter and why she was left unsupervised in the front. He blew me off again. All he said was, "Ma'am, you can take your daughter to the hospital now." Mind you, this is my first interaction with this principal. We don't have an established relationship, so I'm flabbergasted at his rudeness. Also, she clearly doesn't need to go to the ER. She's not crying or throwing a fit. The only evidence of injury is a small ice pack over her eye. He brashly continues telling me that he's not sure what else he can do for me. He states that he's already advised me to seek out medical attention for my daughter, but if I don't comply with his advice, it's not his problem. At this moment, I absolutely lost it. I began screaming and cursing like a sailor. Tears rolled down my eyes as I yelled at him about how unhelpful he was and how hard it is to deal with schooling staff that disregard my child's special needs. He stood up and tried calming me down, but to no avail. I went on and on about how he should be more compassionate for his students and that he would understand if he was a parent. At this moment, his demeanor went from worried to infuriated. He began yelling back at me. He told me he lost his first child a couple months ago due to a freak car accident. He said I have no right to judge his authority and that he's trying his best to overcome his own personal circumstances. He told me that if his son was alive right now, he would take him to the hospital without hesitation rather than storming to the back of the office and causing a ruckus in front of his child. I froze. I truly didn't have anything to say. I felt horrible for losing my temper and criticizing this man. However, at the same time, I knew my daughter did not need medical attention for a bruised eye. I don't know his financial circumstances, but I know that I can't afford outrageous hospital prices unless it's severe. I looked down at my daughter, who seemed calm but confused. She's looking up at me with her head turned to the side and biting her finger for context. Autistic children will bite or chew on their fingers in order to alleviate anxiety or stress, and this is definitely a stressful and anxiety-inducing situation I've put my daughter in. I felt terrible and tried apologizing to the principal. In the middle of me trying to right my wrongs, he cuts me off and begins yelling at me to get out of his office. At this moment, I turn around to the sound of heavy footsteps and see my husband storming in towards us. He seems panicked and immediately asks, "What happened?" The principal catches him up to speed, and tells him that since Olivia's mom doesn't think she needs to see a doctor, then they can leave her at school and get out of the office. He couldn't take it anymore. My husband lost it. He lunged and started swinging at the principal. He picked him up by the collar and slams him into the wall. I tried jumping in to pull my husband off of him, but it's no use. He's almost twice my size and can crush me with one hand if he wanted to, but I still tried out of desperation. At this point, the principal was screaming at the top of his lungs. My husband is repeatedly punching his face in. I'm caught in the middle of these two men, still trying to break them up. I looked over at Olivia, who's now lying down on the floor, stimming uncontrollably. She's clearly horrified. Two large guards run into the office and begin darting towards us. They grab my husband and tackle him, pinning both his hands behind him. It's a disaster, with my husband being manhandled by two guards. The principal was screaming in pain and gushing blood. My autistic daughter was stimming on the floor, crying out of confusion and anxiety. My husband stopped when he got tired. The principal's face was black and blue, covered in blood. 2 hours later, my daughter and I were waiting at the police station where my husband was getting jailed. I'm giving my statement to the officers, but it's not looking promising because my husband attacked first. We get word from the school that the principal is pressing charges on my husband and that my daughter is suspended indefinitely.